Up first, on a more serious note, a lot of shocking actions and disturbing footage has been happening with the Trump administration sending of the National Guard to Democratic cities, Chicago, trying to get the Guard into Portland. And then there's a lot of video and stories from excellent journalism showing ICE's increasingly aggressive and violent tactics in service of MAGA's mass deportation agenda.
And illegal, I might point out.
Well, okay, so we're going to talk about the courts today. And I recall from under the Biden administration that moderate Democrats, centrist Democrats, independents were very much against the idea of court packing, quote unquote, which would be adding justices to the Supreme Court to balance the ideological makeup of the court. The idea was, well, once we start doing it, then they're going to do it, and then we're just going to – it's never going to stop. It's never going to stop. I believe I have found the winning argument of why moderates and centrists and independents need to get on board with a Democratic president and Senate in 2029 adding justices to the Supreme Court. Let's take a look at what's happened so far. It's October, right? So we've only been in this for just under 10 months. Of the executive actions, this is according to the Associated Press. I just pulled up this data today because I wanted to be accurate for you. Of the executive actions that Trump and MAGA have taken, 138 have been partially or fully blocked by U.S. courts. 93 have been left in effect. 94 are still pending. That sounds like the courts are taking him seriously and finding that the majority of his actions are unlawful and unconstitutional. Mm-hmm. In point of fact, I found a bonkers statistic. Just between May 1st and June 23rd of this year, federal judges ruled against the Trump administration 94% of the time. The Supreme Court, however, in that same time period, the Supreme Court backed Trump 94% of the time. As of today, again, look the numbers up. This is according to Reuters. The Supreme Court has backed up Trump at least, in part, 21 of 23 cases. Either partially or fully backed him in 21 of 23 cases. That's 91% of the time. Thus begins my argument. They have been using the shadow docket, the emergency docket. Essentially, this is how you can get a quick decision out of the court, right, during an emergency. What it's supposed to be, an emergency. Instead of waiting for a case to make its way up all the way to the Supreme Court, they have this emergency docket. But they've been making pretty big major decisions through the emergency docket. Decisions related to banning transgender service members, mass firings of federal employees, removing agency officials, even though they have legal protections to be there, deportations. And in a number of these, they have provided zero rationale for their decision. No oral arguments, no written rationale, just 2 or 3 sentences of why they're letting the Trump administration move forward with something. The dissents, particularly from Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, are amazing, and you should go and read them. She somehow manages to find the time to write 20, 30, 40 pages dissenting in a case brought by the Trump administration through the emergency docket. But the majority, the 6 MAGA judges, are like, nope, we're going to make the federal courts do this. We're going to make we're going to make law with no debate, no oral arguments, no positions, no amicus briefs, and we're going to give you a decision in 2 or 3 sentences, which gives the lower courts absolutely zero direction on what to do. Right. And instead of paring it back and saying, no, all right, time out, Trump, time out, MAGA, no more use of the emergency docket. These are big cases. Right. You need to let them go up through with the mass firings of trans service members. There is already a case working its way up to the Supreme Court. Right. But they said, Supreme Court emergency docket, go ahead, fire them, and then the court will get up to us and we'll make a decision then. But just go ahead, fire them. Okay?
Yeah.
And here's my argument to moderates. Here is my argument to independents and centrists that are like, no, we can't add more justices to the court because it's just going to unleash this Pandora's box. You have a serious problem here when a branch of the government, which is in charge of having the final say on what is constitutional and not constitutional, is doing so without telling anybody why they're making a decision. And they're making it perfectly clear that they aren't going to stop, that they're going to allow these to keep coming and coming and coming, and they're going to rule 91, 94% of the time with the Trump administration and not tell any of us why it's constitutional.
Because it isn't, and they can't, and there isn't the intellectual capacity in Neil Gorsuch or Brett Kavanaugh to make an argument like that.
So, what's going to happen in 2029 when the Democratic Party takes over the Senate and they take over the presidency, and these MAGA attorney generals start racing cases to the emergency docket of the Supreme Court? This court has basically said, give it to us. And not only that, they've said, we want the emergency docket, we want these emergency cases, and we're going to rule with MAGA. We're going to give you what you want. And we're not going to tell anybody why. If you are a moderate, if you are a centrist, if you're an independent, that's like, wait a minute, that's not how the court should work. And that's not how the court should work. This is not ideological right now. This is not I didn't like the decision that the court made, and so I'm pissed off about it. Let's add some more liberals in there, and that won't happen anymore. This is about a court that has gone rogue and is creating law without telling us why, without giving federal judges instructions for how to interpret their 2 to 3 sentence decision.
It's anti-American, I'll throw out there.
In this sense of separation of powers and having a Supreme Court that's supposed to say, okay, the president tried to do something, Congress tried to do something, the states tried to do something. Is this constitutional or not? This is why it is. We're going to have arguments. We're going to have lawyers. We're going to have other people. They're going to file amicus briefs, which are like, hey, you should do this. We're lawyers. You should do this. And they file it with the court so they can use it as part of the evidence. And then they write 30, 50, 150 pages on why they've made a decision this way after they voted. We're not getting any of that.
Right.
None of that.
Right.
That is not the way that the Supreme Court is supposed to function. Especially when there are already cases in the works making their way up to the court, and they're just bypassing the Constitution and saying, give me something in the emergency docket, and I will rule for you, MAGA. And I'm not going to tell anybody why I'm doing it. Yep. This is why you need to be on board with adding justices to the Supreme Court. Right. Because the way they are functioning is unconstitutional. And we have no other way. Unless they commit a crime, we can't impeach them. There is literally no way to stop them from doing this, save one of them dying or us adding justices to the Supreme Court.
But it's not wrong to say they are an illegitimate Supreme Court. They are not a legitimate Supreme Court because they've violated all of their principles, all of the country's principles, even about sort of behaving properly and not having influence peddling and all of that. They've violated all of that, and they've violated, they're not in accordance with the way the Supreme Court should be operating to help give guidance. They're not doing that part of their job. So it's illegitimate. It's not a legitimate court. And so I have a real problem with feeling that we have to follow it.
I want to
truthfully.
There are the investigations that ProPublica did looking into all of the, bribes essentially that could be
right. Bald-faced
I think there are alleged cases where you could say, is this a bribe of the Supreme Court justice to get a case that I want? ProPublica did that. All
should
right?
be called a Clarence Thomas.
We can't do investigations.
Call it a Clarence
but we
Thomas.
can't do investigations until the Democratic Senate is in there. But the Democratic Senate, if they don't find grounds to impeach them, the only way to stop them, moderates, independents, centrists, from abusing this power and not telling us why something is or isn't constitutional is to add justices to the Supreme Court. All right, we got to fit in a break here. Before we do, I want to talk about I don't have time to talk about our travel partner because I went on this little argument.
Do it on the way back.
So we're going to talk about our travel partner, Travel Marquette, when we come back from this break. You're listening to The Gailey Show on AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.